Grand strategy, also called high strategy, comprises the purposeful employment of all instruments of power available to a security community. Military historian B. H. Liddell Hart says about grand strategy. The role of grand strategy, higher strategy, is to coordinate and direct all the resources of a nation, or band of nations, towards the attainment of the political object of the war, the goal defined by fundamental policy. Grand strategy should both calculate and develop the economic resources and manpower of nations in order to sustain the fighting services. Also the moral resources, for to foster the people's willing spirit is often as important as to possess the more concrete forms of power. Grand strategy, too, should regulate the distribution of power between the several services, and between the services and industry. Moreover, fighting power is but one of the instruments of grand strategy, which should take account of and apply the power of financial pressure, and, not least of ethical pressure, to weaken the opponent's will. Furthermore, while the horizons of strategy is bounded by the war, grand strategy looks beyond the war to the subsequent peace. It should not only combine the various instruments, but so regulate their use as to avoid damage to the future state of peace, for its security and prosperity. Grand strategy expands on the traditional idea of strategy in three ways. Expanding strategy beyond military means to include diplomatic, financial, economic, informational, etc. means. Examining internal in addition to external forces, taking into account both the various instruments of power and the internal policies necessary for their implementation, including consideration of periods of peacetime in addition to wartime. Issues of grand strategy typically include the choice of primary versus secondary theaters in war, distribution of resources among the various services, the general types of armaments manufacturing to favor, and which international alliances best suit national goals. Grand strategy has considerable overlap with foreign policy, but grand strategy focuses primarily on the military implications of policy. The political leadership of a country typically directs grand strategy with input from the most senior military officials. The development of a nation's grand strategy may extend across many years or even multiple generations. Some have extended the concept of grand strategy to describe multi-tiered strategies in general, including strategic thinking at the level of corporations and political parties. In business, a grand strategy is a general term for a broad statement of strategic action. A grand strategy states the means that will be used to achieve long-term objectives. Examples of business grand strategies that can be customized for a specific firm include concentration, market development, product development, innovation, horizontal integration, divestiture, and liquidation. Historical examples. Peloponnesian War. One of the earlier writings on grand strategy comes from Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War, an account of the Peloponnesian War between the Peloponnesian League and the Delian League. Roman Empire. From the era of Hadrian, Roman emperors employed a military strategy of preclusive security, the establishment of a linear barrier of perimeter defense around the empire. The legions were stationed in great fortresses. These fortresses existed along the perimeter of the empire, often accompanied by actual walls. Due to the perceived impenetrability of these perimeter defenses, the emperors kept no central reserve army. The Roman system of roads allowed for soldiers to move from one frontier to another with relative ease. These roads also allowed for a logistical advantage for Rome over her enemies, as supplies could be moved just as easily across the Roman road system as soldiers. This way, if the legions could not win a battle through military combat skill or superior numbers, they could simply outlast the invaders, who, as historian E.A. Thompson wrote, did not think in terms of millions of bushels of wheat. Emperor Constantine moved the legions from the frontiers to one consolidated roving army as a way to save money and to protect wealthier citizens within the cities. However, this grand strategy would have costly effects of the Roman Empire by weakening its frontier defenses and allowing it to be susceptible to outside armies coming in. Also, people who lived near the Roman frontiers would begin to look to the barbarians for protection after the Roman armies departed. Constantine abolished this frontier security by removing the greater part of the soldiery from the frontiers to cities that needed no auxiliary forces. He thus deprived of help the people who were harassed by the barbarians and burdened tranquil cities with the pest of the military, so that several straightway were deserted. Moreover, he softened the soldiers who treated themselves to shows and luxuries. Indeed, to speak plainly, he personally planted the first seeds of our present devastated state of affairs. Zosimus, 5th century CE historian. World War II. An example of modern grand strategy is the decision of the Allies in World War II to concentrate on the defeat of Germany first. The decision, a joint agreement made after the attack on Pearl Harbor had drawn the U.S. into the war, was a sensible one in that Germany was the most powerful member of the Axis, indirectly threatened the existence of the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union. Conversely, while Japan's conquest garnered considerable public attention, they were mostly in colonial areas deemed less essential by planners and policymakers. The specifics of Allied military strategy in the Pacific War were therefore shaped by the lesser resources made available to the theater commanders. Cold War. The US and the UK used a policy of containment as part of their grand strategy during the Cold War.